This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the PMC SMACA podcast series, Nuts and Bolts Live. Our goal is to bring you educational content that you can listen to wherever and whenever you choose. I'm your host, Jonathan Kowalski. I'm the Executive Director of the PMC and SMACA here in Milwaukee. Today I have virtually in studio, as is the way these days, John May of OnTech Systems. John is the Senior Technical Lead and Sales Engineer for OnTech. Has been a regular for us on Nuts and Bolts for years and helping with our IT podcast series. Thanks again for helping us today, John.
Of course, Jonathan. Thanks a lot for having me.
We've had a number of different scenarios come up in the last 6 months in the construction industry, in sales, in technology, but just in general in the communities, both local and greater, throughout Wisconsin and the country. We're here to talk about something that's pretty important. I would assume that almost everyone in the working world has had some experience with it, if not before the COVID epidemic, then now, and it is working remote. The title of the podcast is Working Remote. So today we're going to talk about technology in the new workplace. Like I said, for over 6 months, people have been forced to work this way. It's a reality that many have had to deal with beforehand. However, we've got a lot of folks who've been forced into it. There's a number of technological issues that people have tried to work through, whether it's getting set up in a home office or working from another external facility. And a lot of this is security based. So what I'm going to ask you straight off the bat is give us an overview. What has the working at home reality meant to you, to OnTech, and to your customers from providing service? You know, let us know kind of what you're experiencing from a real 30,000 foot view.
Sure. Well, for example, I'll give you OnTech as an example. OnTech was already a pretty mobile program where, we pretty easily were able to adapt to a mostly remote existence. We already had technology in place to allow us to collaborate remotely. And most of our clients had software and other systems in place that allowed us to service them remotely as well. So from an OnTech perspective, we were kind of already working in a mode that it was easy for us. Other companies were not as lucky in terms of their workflow. I'll give you my wife. It works in an insurance company, for example, and they had to scramble a bit at the beginning, and a lot of our clients had to scramble a bit at the beginning to try and figure out how they were going to support people from working from home without having to just lay everybody off. And that was a unique challenge for a lot of them, and that they weren't necessarily looking to, trying to plan for, because it's really hard. It's hard to plan for a pandemic like this, or for any kind of eventuality that would require the majority of your workforce to work from home. So there was a lot of scrambling at the beginning. I think the good thing that's come out of this is there are a lot of good lessons learned, and most of the companies have been able to adapt very well to this kind of an existence.
So that's a really good thing to consider and hear from you, is that this landscape is changing. We were all surprised, right? I mean, even those who were prepared were still surprised. We want to add value for the members and partners. A lot of them work in a very blended environment, whether there's a work staff, a field staff, a sales staff, some collaboration or combination of the three. I'd love to say that this situation is going to be over in 6 weeks. We'll all be back to where we were pre-March. It's probably not going to happen. So as management and leaders and others consider what the new landscape looks like, what should they be considering from a software standpoint, from a security standpoint? What's going to be critical to sustaining this kind of hybrid environment?
Sure. And so really the first step is identifying the roles in your organization and who can realistically work from remote and who really needs to be in-house. So for your manufacturing clients, the people running the machines, the people doing the boxing and the shipping and stuff, you can't do that kind of work remotely. You have to be there to do that. So those are, you have to accommodate that. But for the people that are in the offices and the people that are in supervisory roles where they don't necessarily have to be on site all the time, whether you're in kind of a hybrid existence where you're on site part of the time and you're working remotely the other part, or whether you're full-time remote, there are things to consider when you're doing that. So one, the biggest stumbling block that we've seen for a lot of our companies that we work with is a primarily on-site infrastructure. And what I mean by that is, all of their primary systems are in-house. Their accounting systems, their email systems, their files, their computers are all desktops. So how do you?
You're talking about technological systems, physical systems, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So, giving people that are working from home when they're not physically in the building access to that stuff introduces challenges in the way of how are you going to provide that access? What systems are you going to need to provide for them to have at home in order to be able to get into that kind of an access? When you're talking, some of our clients have had a good investment in cloud solutions. And what I mean by that is the infrastructure is not in your building, it's somewhere else, whether that's hosted by a local third party or whether that's hosted by a large organization like Microsoft or Amazon or something like that, where the infrastructure and the actual physical location is distributed and not in your local place. Those we typically see have a much easier time of adapting to this kind of a situation. For example, we see a lot of our customers are on Office 365 or what they now call Microsoft 365 for their email. And it makes it really easy to work from home if you're doing email primarily, because you can access that from pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
So there's, depending on how your systems are set up, the more you can have in the cloud, the more flexible generally your organization is going to be with regards to this type of a situation.
So I'll use us as an example. We had actually, I don't know if it's good luck or good planning, but it's probably a little bit of both. We had the intent to go to the SharePoint, Microsoft SharePoint digital cloud platform at the end of 2019. We initiated that process early 2020 on kind of a long lag, kind of hit certain milestones and get it implemented at some point. Well, when this hit, we were about halfway through the process. We had OnTech, who you guys are our provider, come and whether it was just through goodwill that had been built up or it fell the right way in the calendar, our technical lead came out and was able to push us through that process much quicker than we would have, but it enabled us to be up and running, I'd say by March 25th after going home on March 13th, and it changed the game for us. The situation involves both operational challenges with, say, we have a physical workforce and physical technologies in a building where we have to schedule certain times for people not to overlap in a real at the real beginning of this. Now we've got a little more flexibility with spacing and timing and capacities and such, but the technological is the other. And that's the point where we're really able to benefit from the cloud system. Tell us, what could a customer expect? They call you today, they call OnTech, or they call their provider today saying, we've been putting this off long enough. We're in a little gap here, hopefully, between, possibly another kind of dramatic situation. What's it look like from a cloud conversion? And I know you can't speak generally, but we were able to have this taken care of in, I'd call it 3 to 4 weeks. Eventually, we had some mapping that we did ahead of time. But what does someone want to anticipate as they consider this?
Sure. So, I'll take it from the effect of, let's say that it's a new customer that OnTech has never worked with before.
Sure.
We're kind of hitting the ground from ground zero. The first thing we typically do is we want to do an onboarding, which basically is kind of a deep dive into their systems, find out what they're doing, how they're doing it, things like that, so that we can get a good understanding for what their current state is. Once we know that, we can make some good recommendations on, okay, well, you got on-site email, let's move that off. You've got some files, we can move that into SharePoint.
Yep.
These applications have cloud-based alternatives that you can investigate, things like that. We can start coming up with ideas for giving you that flexibility of that cloud deployments. And then we just, once that company makes a decision to move forward, we just go. A typical small to medium sized organization, so let's use a round number of about 20 users. that, a full conversion from on-site infrastructure to cloud from start to finish, that could take about, anywhere from 1 to 3 months, depending on how complicated their environment is
Sure.
and how aggressive they want to be. And so,
And again, you can't speak specifics, but in generalities, the cost structure on a conversion like that, is it based on hours committed from a technician on your side? Is it technological investment? How does someone kind of anticipate, okay, for
sure.
example, we're at the association, we're doing our budget planning for 21 right now. Maybe some people are finding, geez, we didn't go to any conferences or have any meetings this year. We have some capital or cash budget lying around. Is this something we could get into? How do you kind of anticipate that aside from having a conversation to think, is this even in a possibility?
Sure. So one of the things, and some places may call it an advantage and other companies may call it a disadvantage, is that in moving to the cloud, you're moving from a capital investment structure to an operational investment structure. So rather than looking at it as, okay, we have to spend $25,000 every 5 years to update our infrastructure, and our applications and everything else, it becomes, okay, we're paying $10 a month per person.
Yep.
And it's just an ongoing cost. And so you're amortizing that capital investment into an operational cost. And for some organizations, they love that. I used to work at a place that they didn't do anything capital. They leased everything, they made everything into an operational cost, and that's just how they did business. Other places, especially in the manufacturing environment, they want to have their investment last as long as possible. And so in order to keep that going on, they prefer capital investment. And so that's totally understandable, but most cloud systems run on that, subscription style operational cost. So there would be some labor involved up ahead. Every company's different, and so there's some initial upfront, big cost, and then there would be some ongoing, subscription costs depending on the level of service that you want and the types of services that you need and things like that.
So you guys would talk through them on here's the size of your organization, here's essentially the file mapping or file conversion we'll talk about, or what services you want to put in the cloud. Here's an estimate of how many hours it would take us ahead of time. There's your lump sum out front, give or take, right? They'd engage in that with you. And then, like you said, and that's where we looked at it, again, COVID notwithstanding, or the advantage or need to be remote notwithstanding, we said we're tired of maintaining this hard server, this physical piece of equipment. It will cost us a little now, but then we're going to be out of that business. We don't have to worry about that every 5 years, like you said, chunk. We're just on the rolling process now with Microsoft. So
yeah, the other nice thing about that too is that then when you get onto that rolling cost, as you said, you're automatically entitled to the latest and greatest versions of those pieces of software.
Sure.
When you buy something, like for example, if you buy a boxed copy of Microsoft Office, it's, and you buy it today. Today is, I think their boxed copy is called Office 2019. That box of Office will never be anything except for Office 2019. So in 7 or 8 years, when everybody else is on, version 2026, you're still going to be on 2019, and you may be missing out on features, functionality. Eventually, Microsoft will stop supporting it, and so you'll have to be forced to buy a new copy, unfortunately. With the subscription service, you're always on the latest and greatest. So you're going to have the latest compatibility, functionality, everything else that goes along with that.
Yeah. So we just kind of went down a path here on remote file, remote email, getting your physical technologies out of having to be in the physical building. Talking about the next 6 months, you've got a number of clients in all sorts of different capacities and industries. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are some things that people are saying, okay, we want to take that to the next level, or we want to make sure, and I'll talk about something simple, because we engage with it a little challenge today. We're a Microsoft Teams organization. We're a GoToMeeting organization. We like this product. Are there 3 or 4 checklist items, and maybe it's on the security side, that people want to make sure they have in place over the next 6 months to try to continue to or enhance their success with being remote?
Sure. The number one thing that I've seen that is the biggest stumbling block for remote users is collaboration tools.
Mm.
That is the, that is the biggest thing that you have to figure out, because we, human beings are social creatures. We work well. We want to be able to collaborate. We want to be able to see each other. Like right now, our viewers probably, or listeners probably can't see it, but we're talking on a GoToMeeting and we have our video going so you and I can see each other.
Yeah.
When people are first in remote access situations, without the collaboration tools in place like video conferencing and stuff like that, you lose a lot of the benefit of being in the same building. What we've found is that by implementing tools like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, whatever product you want to look at, you lessen the disadvantage of the remote usage because you're able to actually see the people that you're talking to, interact. You get that facial expression, you get the inflection of their voice. It's not all just done over email at that point. So I know for me, when I'm working with someone remotely, it's a lot easier for me to collaborate with them when I'm able to talk to them and see what they're talking about and see their face and infer those, unspoken cues or unwritten cues from the conversation. And so that's the number one thing I think that people need to think about.
And you got to find out what's best for you, right? I mean, like I said,
Yep.
there's the GoToMeeting. Teams is very popular. We actually started with GoToMeeting. We're using it today. We're trying to phase into Teams because it's part of our 365 subscription. So there are a number of them out there. My guess, and I don't know anything, is that with more remote, there's a higher risk or possibility for a cybersecurity event. What are you seeing out there in the field? What should members be aware of? Are there simple precautions, simple products? Maybe it's as simple as having that piece of paper up over your camera, when you're not in a Teams meeting. What are you advising or seeing for people from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Sure. And this is really actually super important. We're actually seeing an uptick in globally, just in general, of attacks specifically designed to go after remote users. Because what we're seeing happen is the people that get, that are much smarter than I am and do this kind of cybersecurity stuff full time, they're actually seeing the attackers go after people with computers at their houses that they know are laptops, or maybe a desktop that someone brought in from the office to work from home. And they're putting malware on those computers and then letting them sit, and
So,
then bring them back
take
to
it,
the
yeah,
office.
take a half step back for me on that.
Sure.
When you say go after, that's infiltrating through a click through on an email. That's,
Yeah.
what are the,
The number one vector for attacking a company is still email. So, they may be, they're changing how they word the emails. So it may be, hey, are you working remotely? Here are some tips that you can use to increase your productivity, and they'll give you a link. Or they'll do something, they target people that they know are working remotely, with wording in these emails and things like that to make it more appealing for them to click on those links.
so once you click that link, then that bad guy gets access through your IP address of some sort. Now they can start playing behind the scenes. And like you said, they let it sit there until you go back into the office.
Right, because once your computer has been compromised, and you bring that computer back into the main office, now the attacker potentially has access to everything in that office. And so they're seeing, from a profit perspective, they're seeing a significant potential to exploit these remote users, especially when they start coming back into the office. There are ways that you can protect yourself against that, though. Number one is make sure that, and this is really going to be more for the leadership and the IT leadership within organizations rather than just the normal user, because the normal user isn't going to know how to do this kind of stuff. But the management, upper management, ownership, IT leadership needs to be aware of these things. Make sure that you have good antivirus on the machines that can be managed remotely. A lot of companies that we see, they'll use traditional antivirus products that have a in-house management system. So there's an application that sits on a server somewhere that manages things like their antivirus definitions, pushes out configurations, stuff like that. When somebody brings that computer off site, they no longer have access to that command and control system for their antivirus. And so the antivirus isn't receiving instructions anymore. It's not receiving updates like it should, and it becomes less effective, especially over time. You know, the longer an antivirus goes without being updated, the less and less effective it becomes. Pretty drastically, actually.
Yeah. So it's exponential. It's not one day to one day. It's actually okay.
Yeah, the longer it goes, the more and more modern threats are going to be, it's not going to be able to protect against. So make sure that your antivirus is, is something that can be managed from remotely. There are many antivirus programs that are cloud-based now, where all the management is happening in the cloud. For example, OnTech with our clients, we use a product with our clients called WebRoot, and that is cloud-based, which means that computer can be anywhere as long as it has an internet connection. It's going to be getting the latest updates. Make sure you have a way of managing the latest patches for computers. A lot of our organizations that we work with, they will sometimes use cheap or free products, or they'll just really configure the computers to update themselves. But that doesn't, if they're not in the building and they're not able to talk to those systems that you have in the building, you don't know what the current status is. You don't know if they ran into a problem and aren't able to install patches or any of that other. You're not getting any kind of visibility into that. And so make sure that you have a patch management system that's able to patch those computers on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Again, OnTech with our clients, we have a system that works cloud-based, so you don't ever have to worry. As long as that computer has internet, it'll get its updates. The other thing too, and this is kind of geared more towards the users, is train your users through a good user training program on how to recognize threats. Teach them how to recognize when an email is off. Teach them about the current threats that are happening and what they can do to recognize those and not respond to them or not click. You see things all the time about how, okay, this looks like a fake email, but a lot of users don't understand how to recognize that. And so training your users on that adds a significant layer of protection.
The fake emails are getting better, right? I mean, the Netflix one is the big one, right? You've probably seen this. Some of these Netflix about, who doesn't have Netflix, and it's change your billing address. We got this update, and you look, and even if you've seen some fake ones, some of these look really good. And all the voter stuff, there's so much that is coming through right now that the user education has got to be tremendous.
And there's a ton of information that's available about yourself and your company online.
Yeah.
So if an attacker wants to target your company specifically, whether they've found a good number of people that they feel would be easy to exploit, or whether, for whatever reason, between your company website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram,
Sure.
I mean, it's really easy for someone to find out who the big players in your company are and impersonate them to make it feel like it's legitimate and they need you to go to Walmart and buy some gift cards and send them the codes.
Yeah.
I've talked to a Walmart loss prevention specialist about this, and he said at the time they were having to really try and convince people multiple times a week to not buy these gift cards in bulk.
In the store, they've gotten so far as to go to the store based on this false lead and spamming.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. So it's still there. It's still very common. And what we found is, a good education program for your users is a good way to help mitigate a lot of that. OnTech uses a product called the Security Awareness Training from WebRoot that will send. Not only does it do traditional training, you go to the website, you watch a video for 5-10 minutes and you get some information, but it will also do things like send fake phishing emails. And then when you click on it, it will send you to some training and say, hey, you shouldn't have clicked on this and this is why. And kind of give people kind of the heads up that, this is what you're going to be seeing.
It's a fire alarm, or it's a fire drill at school, right?
Exactly.
We're gonna train you in a situation where you can't be hurt, so that when the time comes, you know what to do.
Yep.
So one of the things that I'll give you guys another plug that is actually on the association's agenda for 2021 is a vulnerability assessment. I know that that's something you guys do as well, and that's something where they could just reach out and say, all right, we've been remote for 6 months. We don't know what the next 6 months looks like. Can you take a look at what we've got going and start poking holes in it so we can plug those holes?
Yep. And we are actually starting to evaluate automated processes and systems for our security assessments that will specifically look at remote workforce and how companies are doing their remote workforce, and kind of helping us to assess that, because that's a difficult thing to do, because with remote workforce you're spread out so much.
Sure.
And
So, I'll get real elementary. The virtual remote antivirus is the face mask for your association, because when that computer goes home, your contact tracing just went from a little small pod to this entire world, where all of a sudden your vulnerability of being exposed to something you don't want to be exposed to grows tremendously. We joke, we say that the mechanical contractors are the face mask for your building, the HVAC and the plumbing and the pipe fitting. Well, you guys, and through the antivirus counseling and service providing, are given that same, hopefully, sense of security for people in the workplace, the new workplace.
Yep. The other thing too, along with that, is going along with your analogy, in addition to being the antivirus being the face mask, quarantine the computers. Just because you're at home doesn't mean that the computer isn't a work computer. And so don't let your kid load Minecraft on it. Don't go to websites that aren't work related. Make sure as a company, you want to have a good acceptable use policy for your organization on what you allow and don't allow for your computers to be used for, and make sure that your remote workers are made, reminded that this is what is that it's there for, and that you're going to be, if you have the right systems in place, you can monitor what they're doing and where they're going, and that kind of, don't let your kids load stuff on it. Don't you load things on it. It's not your computer, it's your company's computer. So, it just adds the level of exposure. So quarantine the computer, use it what it's for. Don't use it for things that you don't, that it's not intended for.
Be smart, right? So this is great, John. We could probably keep talking about this for a long time, but we want to be respectful and give people enough information to get them interested in listening, and then maybe take some next steps on their own. We talked about the importance of understanding where you've come in the last 6 months, or even longer, with building your remote workforce and the pieces in place. The number one issue, of course, is the collaboration tool. Make sure you have something that fits your culture and allows your people to be successful. And if not, reevaluate. You're just because you got committed to one 3 months ago and you're panicked doesn't mean that you got to stick with it. And then the big biggie, which is not, it should always be at the front of people's minds, but it's that antivirus. Make sure, particularly if you've got a remote workforce, that you're using a remote antivirus software, and really reduce those vulnerabilities. And reach out to OnTech if they have any questions or want to pursue that. Give us the contact information. Give us a way that they can get a hold of you should they have any questions.
Sure. So my email address directly is john.may, john.may, at ontech.com, ontech.com. You can also go to our website. It's just www.ontech.com, and there's a section there where you can submit your information to have one of our account managers reach out and kind of have a discussion with you on things. And so feel free to, our phone number is 262-522-8560, and you can call that number. There's a short call tree and you can select the option for sales, and someone will take your call and be able to, start that conversation with you as well for answering your questions.
We've been a customer of OnTech for a long time. Our relationship has grown tremendously in the last 6 months as our needs have become greater, and I would recommend anyone reach out. If nothing else, just have a conversation. Say, here's where we're at. What do you think? because they can be very helpful. John May, thank you. Thanks to OnTech Systems for joining us today. Thank you to the listeners, the members, the partners for viewing this. You can listen or watch, in this instance, Nuts and Bolts Live from your computer. You can visit www.pmsmca.com or download. We'll see how that works. Go to pmsmca.com. I don't know about downloading through iTunes or SoundCloud because this is more of a video than a remote, but we're excited to bring this content to you. We ask members if they ever have ideas on things they'd like to hear more about to reach out directly. I'm at jonathan@pmsmca.com or 414-469-8276. Thanks again, John May. Thanks again, listeners. This is Jonathan Kowalski for the Association and Nuts and Bolts Live saying we'll see you again soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay busy. Thanks, John.
Thank you.